Hi everyone, this is your host Latifa Swailah. Welcome to Qudwa's podcast powered by the CFA Society Bahrain. At Qudwa, we believe in the philosophy of paying it forward. This is why we are recreating our conversations that we have with people we look up to. We would like to take this time to thank Ahli United Bank in continuously supporting us in our initiatives. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of creating more than one source of income, removing reliance on your job's income, and also appreciating building your abundance of wealth. And today's guest has a considerable amount of financial expertise in that sense. Hamid has over 15 years of banking experience, and he's the author of the book Islamic Real Estate Investment Trusts, a Property Selection Methodology. Hamid, it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today. With so much revolving around money and investing, there's also a lot of psychology revolving around all of this, and there's also so much to learn and unlearn as well. So I'm curious to know about your own perspective. What's one thing that you had to unlearn during your early adulthood, that you had to unlearn about money?
Yes, well, so one of the most popular myths about money and in particular investing is that investments and investing generally is for the rich. And that's a myth that I had to unlearn obviously early on, is that the actual act of investing and the desire to invest and the objectives of investing applies to everybody, and it's not just for those who look at hedge funds and international portfolios and so forth. So that was one thing that I had to unlearn pretty quick. And actually investing can start at a very early stage, and in this context, I just wanted to frame that when we talk about investing, there's financial investments. So that's when we talk about taking your other sources of income, increasing the number of the sources of income that you have, taking your savings and placing them into different kinds of, whether they are funds or asset classes. But there's also investing in yourself, and that's a very important concept that we also need to focus on here. And so basically, in a nutshell, investing is for everybody, and it's not just for those who have high levels of wealth.
So with the current situation that we're living in, we're in a world where we can't not only rely on one sole income right now, but we can't as well provide for a family with the income that we have. So as a result, we see many people taking action into setting their own businesses as well. So how important is investing in creating multiple sources of income?
Right, so we all learned that diversification is very important in everything that we do, especially when it comes to investing, because it lowers the kind of risk that you carry on your portfolio. And just like your investment portfolio diversification is important, so is your entire portfolio with regards to your job, any business you may create, any investment funds that you may have. It's very important to diversify your portfolio. And there's a very interesting concept here called human capital that we can look into, which is effectively the today value of all your future income. And that is effectively part of your wealth today. The present value, let's say, of your future expected compensation and income from your job. And so when you look at that as in terms of a part of your portfolio, you then also need to look at where you invest your money and what kind of multiple sources of income do you desire. But then it's important to note here that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It also depends on your own time availability, your passion, and your risk tolerances. If you find that your job does not allow you a lot of free time, then taking an active role in an entrepreneurship project may end up harming your actual job and your business that you create. However, if you find that you have the time and passion to create your own business, then by all means that might be something that you might explore. If you find that your risk tolerance is not very high and you prefer passive income, that's something that comes back to you as well to decide on. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really depends on the person, their passions, and the kind of risk tolerance they have, along with the time availabilities.
We had an interesting conversation a week ago where you mentioned that we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket, in a sense that we shouldn't invest all of our money in the in the sector that's directly related to our job. Could you please elaborate more on that?
Yes, so that comes back to your own portfolio diversification. So from a financial perspective, if you work in, let's say, the banking industry, all of your, let's say, fixed income, your salary, is coming from the banking industry itself. Now, when you come and decide on where to invest your money in multiple sources of income, if you're trying to hedge your portfolio and diversify your risk, then you wouldn't want to take all your investments and place them back into the banking industry. You might look at other sectors that are not directly correlated with the banking industry, so that you end up having with a good multiple sources of income that can hedge you in times where certain sectors can can grow or decline, if that's your objective. If you're the kind of person who is really aggressive in terms of investing and you have a very high level of risk tolerance, then and you believe a certain sector is the way forward, then that could be called tactical investing, where you can overweight in your portfolio that kind of sector. But from a general perspective, if the objective is to create multiple sources of income to protect yourselves in times where you might need that other source of income in case your primary source, which is your salary, may decline or be non-existent, then you wouldn't place your money in the same sector. You might want to go to a different one. But again, it all depends. It's an individual characteristic matter here, and there's no one size fits all.
I want to go back slightly a bit to where you mentioned diversifying your portfolio and knowing your risk tolerance here. For someone who would be listening to this and doesn't really have a background on investing, how can they know what their tolerance is when it comes to investing?
Right. So obviously there are a lot of online tools that you can go in and there's some questions that you can answer, and then they give you a risk tolerance. So there's always that. But ultimately it's what you know yourself. So one of the things that you might want to consider is, if I invest in a certain portfolio, am I the kind of person who checks it on an hourly basis and look and if the portfolio declined by a small percentage, do I end up getting an anxiety? Then that means that you're probably not the person who has a high level of risk tolerance. Or are you the kind of person who's unhappy with 3-4% returns and you're basically looking at either 30-40% gains or losses, and you have a let's put it this way, a strong stomach for losses, then that's something else as well. And on the other side also, it's where you are in your life right now. If the objective behind your investing is to get a constant stream of income that's stable for a retirement perspective, then chances are you wouldn't want to go for a very highly aggressive portfolio. But if you're at a young age and you can carry forward the risk of losses, and you want to make it big basically, then maybe you do go for a higher level of portfolio risk. Ultimately, it's how you feel, and that's why I would always advise that you at least think about investing at a very early stage, and that you try different things to understand yourself and understand what kind of risk tolerance do you have going forward, so that you can set up your own personal financial affairs in a way that does not create anxiety for you, but at the same time provides you with the safety that you need from such endeavors.
We're living in a period of low interest rates and high inflation at the moment, and also at the same time we're going through a crisis. So at this time, would you recommend someone to start investing already or save for rainy days?
So here the question is, it's a matter of either saving or investing. I think it's a matter of both. Saving is very important from both a financial perspective. As you mentioned, it gives you some cushion for rainy days, but it's also very important from a psychological perspective to feel at least partly safe. And that feeling is what enables you to probably achieve more and take a higher level of risk in the other parts of your portfolio. So saving is very important, whether it's during periods of crisis or during periods of boom. It's important to allocate a percentage of your portfolio at least to savings. When it comes to inflation being high and interest rates being low, that effectively means that your money is losing value in real terms on a daily basis. So investing is always a good idea in such times, but also it depends if it's in the right places or not. So in times where you find that a certain sector is very volatile and you want to overweight your portfolio there, again, it comes back to your own risk tolerance. Are you happy with the level of risk that you're taking in that portfolio? if you lose half of your portfolio overnight, which could be the case when you invest in certain kind of stock that we've seen recently. Are you the kind of person who can take it forward and can reinvest in the right places and try to grow it back? Or are you the kind of person who does not even like the slightest amounts of losses, in which case you might want to look at lower risk investments. So it all depends on investing in the right places. But one important thing I'd like to mention is that during these times, so during crisis times, one of the most important investments that you can do is in yourself. So during this time, investing in your own education, investing in your own experiences, growing your own personal, let's call it your own portfolio, but not your financial portfolio, your actual skills portfolio, is crucially important here, because that never declines. The more you invest in yourself, you can only grow. There is no decline in investing in yourself. Anything that you learn, anything that you do is always going to add value to yourself. It's never going to diminish your value. So it's very important to always allocate a good part of your portfolio and investing in yourself.
I'm curious to know, what did you invest in yourself during this time?
So when I started my career, I really looked at certain, after I finished my bachelor's degree, of course, I started looking at technical qualifications to improve my technical skills. And that's when I started studying things like the project management professional qualification. And I actually started the CFA as well at what I thought was at an early stage. And that really helped me a lot in my career, and really helped me a lot actually even outside my career, because it also taught me how to manage my own portfolio. And after that, I continued studying into doing my MBA, and that's what resulted in the book being written. And since then as well, I've been reading up a lot on journals and trying to keep up with the very fast changing times, more specifically on the digital stage right now. And I think it's very important to continuously keep up to date with all the kind of advancements that are happening. Otherwise, in this specific time that we live in, you could easily find yourself out of the curve.
True. I'm curious to know, from your own perspective, what's one common mistake do you see with people when it comes with money management? So
one thing I've noticed about that particular question is that people tend to increase their spending rates at a higher rate than their income is increasing. So as they advance in their career and as their income increases, they tend to increase their spending proportionately, if not higher. And what ends up happening in some cases, and this is not something across all, in some cases is that they end up taking medium-term debt for short-term expenses. And that can end up harming them if it's not studied properly. So it's very important for people to look at money management from the sense of when you borrow for consumables, it's not a wrong thing to do that, but understand the reason that you're doing this and what return would that provide to you. Not everything is a financial return. Sometimes making a certain purchase or an expenditure really helps you improve your own. For example, if you're investing in your own education, that's always a good indication. But also when you're making an expenditure for something that's personal, sometimes that also helps you and helps your own psychology and gives you a drive to go forward. So it's all about making sure that you spend your money in the right places and that you don't end up over leveraging yourself for consumables that you don't really have a use for.
Speaking of debt, if someone is currently loaded with debt and at the same time they want to start investing, how would you approach this person when it comes to them wanting to invest in?
So obviously from a financial perspective, the rule is quite simple. If the cost of your debt, if the rate that you're paying on your debt is less than the rate that you can generate from your investments, then you should go ahead and invest as much as you can using that debt that you have. That's a financial perspective. However, if you look at it from a behavioral point of view, it comes back to the point that you need to first identify why you have such high debt, especially when you're talking about credit card balances, which are generally used for consumables. You need to really look at the reason that you have such a high debt and whether this high debt is sustainable with you or not. If it's for example, if you have a mortgage for an asset, for a house that you live in, or you have a facility for a car that you're driving, then those are, technically assets that you need to be able to generate the other sources of income that you have. But if you've got a high credit card balance on consumables, luxury items, let's call it the luxury items that you don't really need, then you need to look at it from a behavioral point of view and whether you can sustain such levels of debt. That's all part of your own understanding of yourself. And that's why I recommend at an early stage that you also try to always explore different kinds of things to be able to understand what kind of investment habits do you have and what kind of debt appetite do you have.
So what's the right mindset to have when it comes to money?
So in terms of money, I in my own view, money is a temporary tool that can come and go. You may invest it and end up making tenfold times your money. You may lose it overnight, and that's happened to a lot of people, both making money and losing money. So it is a temporary tool that can come and go easily. But I think that your mind, your talent, your experience, your confidence, and ethics are something that's 100% under your control. And nobody can take it away, and nobody can add to it except yourself. So I think that where you put your money in is basically very important. And when you look at investing your money to generate a supplementary source of income, that's very, very important. But also equally important, if not more, is to keep investing in yourself, because that's the way that you end up creating more value, and that's the way that you end up generating more income, is by learning as well. So you always have to invest in yourself first. You have to keep learning. As an example, no book is too expensive and no qualification costs too much, as everything will add value to you.
Going back to you mentioning that money is scarce and not abundant itself, I want to bring to you two situations. Someone who has a privilege and already has money, and someone else who unfortunately has taken debts to provide for something that he has in need. So I understand that money is very scarce, but I also understand that down the line, just because someone has money to begin with doesn't necessarily mean that he can preserve it years down the line. And the same thing that has to do with the other person who happened to take a lot of debts doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be forever in debt. He can turn his life around. So how can you build wealth and live in financial abundance even if you're not even if you don't have a lot of advantages on your side?
So, I mean, there's a lot of examples in history with people who were loaded with debt on the verge of bankruptcy and ended up becoming on the rich lists of the world. And equivalently, there's a lot of other examples of people who had inherited large sums of money and ended up not having much at the end. It all comes back to, again, the investing in yourself. It's where you place your money and your time. And we all the saying time is money, so that's also a part of investment that you're doing. Is where do you place your time and your money? Do you improve your own skills? Do you try to look for an opportunity that doesn't exist? Do you try to solve a problem that nobody has had a solution for? So it really does not mean if you've started with a lot of money that you'll end up with a lot of money, or if you've started with a lot of debt that you can't come out of it. It all comes back to yourself and the amount of investments you've done in yourself, the ambition that you have, the drive that you have, where you spend your time, and how you spend your time. How efficiently do you spend your time? Do you really try to look at innovative solutions that nobody's been able to find out, or are you the source of person who would like to be a passive in this world and just cruise along? So it all comes back to you. It doesn't really matter how you started.
Yeah, I really think there's a lot to do with the choices that you make today and the kind of mindset that you have. After all, if whatever situation that you're in and you end up dwelling on, let's say, the debt that you have, or you're in huge financial abundance today and you keep spending it today, I think it all boils down to the choices that you're doing today and your mindset as well.
Yes, of course. And it's also important here to note that it's not something that only young people can do, because we all know the story of Colonel Sanders, who ended up starting post 60 and ended up creating one of the largest franchises in the world. And we've all heard about the many young entrepreneurs who were able to become billionaires in a very fast time. So there's no one answer for all. It's all about where you are in terms of your mindset. You could be in retirement, you could be just finishing off school. It doesn't really make a difference. It's all about what kind of ambition and drive you have for your own career and your own future. And there's never one size fits all. It's never a one solution for everybody. Some people have the skill sets and the risk tolerance to be entrepreneurs, and a lot of them also can't see themselves as employees. Others don't believe themselves as entrepreneurs and don't really see that as a source of career for them. So that's the beauty of the world we live in. Everyone has different mindset and a different need, and we all complement each other.
So if I put it in one question, how or at what age do you recommend people to start investing? What would your answer be?
Well, again, so if we're talking about investing in self, you're doing that from preschool. And the amount of time you spend in school, the amount of time you spend doing extracurricular reading is all investing in yourself. If we talk about financial investments, I would recommend that people at least start thinking about it the day that they get a paycheck that they can save from. So that day is the day that I recommend you start thinking about it and you start experiencing different forms of investments, because as you rightfully said before, not everybody has financial backgrounds and has studied finance well enough to be able to look at proper portfolio theories and so forth. So it's all about trial and error at the early stage. And we all know that when you at the early stage of your career is not when you make most of your money from your job, at least. So experimenting with investing is a very good idea to get started off at the early stage of your career. You get to identify yourself, and you get to know more about your own appetites, and you get to know more about the markets and where to place your money. So I would recommend at a very early stage to at least think and try to think about it and start exploring options.
For someone starting in their own career, we would not be able to figure out what our niche is. So how important is trial and error in terms of finding that out?
So obviously at the start of your career, to be able to identify what really makes you tick, what really is your niche, having different experiences is very important. So trying a lot of different experiences is always recommended at the start of your career. That's really how you identify what makes you tick, what is the actual niche that you can provide. But always keep in mind that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to be a master of everything that you try. So while it's very important to try a lot of different experiences, have some knowledge about many different types of fields, it's also very important to look at the one field that you're most passionate about, that you're much better at than the other fields that you've tried, and really focus on that as well and create that as your niche. So you can operate under the T concept, which is that effectively at the top of the T is where you know a little bit about many different fields. So you know a little bit about accounting, a little bit about trading, a little bit about marketing, a little bit about sales. But then if the one thing that you're good at is, let's say, treasury, for example, then you really focus on that field and you try to be an expert in that as well, while not forgetting the many different kinds of fields that exist out there.
Thank you so much, Hamid, for taking your time and accepting our invitation.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for having me here. And thank you for the CFA Society and Qudwa.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any episodes.